Jasmine Washington, 7 months pregnant, clutches her stinging cheek in first class, stunned silence enveloping the cabin. Flight attendant Heather Burke stands over her, face twisted with contempt. Jasmine's phone buzzes with a text from husband Terrence, just bought Skyway Airlines. Surprise for our anniversary. Passengers filming everything. Before diving into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more unbelievable true stories of justice served. Now, let's rewind to see how this explosive confrontation came to be. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Washington Johnson residence, casting a warm glow across the marble kitchen island. Jasmine Washington, 32 years old and 7 months pregnant, stood by the counter, sipping her decaffeinated tea while reviewing blueprints for her upcoming presentation in Chicago. "Are you absolutely sure you should be traveling?" Terrence Johnson asked for what must have been the 10th time that week. At 38, Terrence had built his tech empire from nothing, becoming one of the few black billionaires in America. His concern was etched across his face as he watched his wife gather her materials. Jasmine rolled her eyes affectionately. "This presentation could secure the biggest contract of my career. Besides, Dr. Thompson cleared me to fly until 8 months." She placed a protective hand over her swollen belly. "Little miss and I will be fine." I know, Terrence conceded, pulling her gently into his arms. "I just worry. I'll join you tomorrow after I wrap up this deal." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "The mysterious deal you won't tell me about? Some anniversary surprise?" Terrence smiled mysteriously. "You've been complaining about Skyway Airlines since we met. Trust me, you'll love this one." What Jasmine didn't know was that for the past 3 months, Terrence had been in negotiations to acquire the struggling airline. Skyway had been plagued with customer service issues and, more troublingly, several discrimination lawsuits in recent years. Terrence saw an opportunity not just for business but for transformation. As Jasmine gathered her things, she reflected on how they'd met 5 years ago. She had been hired to design Terrence's first official headquarters after his startup hit it big. What began as professional admiration quickly blossomed into something deeper. Despite coming from entirely different worlds, Jasmine from a middle-class family in Detroit, Terrence from the south side of Chicago, they connected instantly. Their wedding 3 years ago had made headlines in both business and architecture magazines. "Lawrence is waiting out front with the car," Terrence said, checking his watch. "Text me when you land." "Always do," Jasmine replied, kissing him goodbye. As she wheeled her carry-on toward the front door, the neighborhood security guard approached from his patrol car. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called sharply. "This is a private community. May I ask where you're going?" Jasmine took a deep breath, too familiar with this scenario. "I live here, Curtis. Have for 3 years now." Curtis looked embarrassed as recognition dawned. "Mrs. Johnson. I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you from a distance." Jasmine nodded curtly and continued toward the waiting town car. This wasn't the first time she'd been questioned in her own neighborhood, and despite Terrence's complaints to the Homeowners Association, it likely wouldn't be the last. Lawrence, their longtime driver, greeted her with a warm smile as he took her luggage. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson. All set for Chicago?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, settling into the back seat. As they pulled away from the mansion, Lawrence caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "If you don't mind me saying, be careful on Skyway today. My cousin works ground crew there, says there've been some incidents lately. Black passengers getting hassled, especially in first class." Jasmine sighed. "Thanks for the heads up, Lawrence, but I'll be fine. First class ticket, company credit card, 7 months pregnant. What could possibly happen?" Lawrence nodded but didn't look convinced. "Just keep your cool if anything does. That's all I'm saying." Jasmine turned to look out the window, one hand absently caressing her belly. She'd faced discrimination her entire life. In architecture school, where she was often the only black woman in her class, in professional settings where clients sometimes mistook her for an assistant rather than the lead architect. She'd developed a thick skin and a strategic approach: remain calm, speak with authority, document everything. Little did she know, all those skills would be tested to their limits in the next 24 hours. Atlanta International Airport bustled with Friday morning activity as Jasmine made her way toward the Skyway Airlines check-in counter. Despite her status as a frequent flyer and the first-class ticket purchased on her corporate card, the initial signs of trouble appeared immediately. "Coach, check-in is down there," said Brad, the blonde ticket agent, without looking up from his computer when Jasmine approached his counter. "I'm flying first class," Jasmine replied evenly, sliding her ID and booking confirmation across the counter. Brad glanced at her documents, then at her, skepticism evident in his expression. He typed something into his computer with deliberate slowness. "This reservation was made with a corporate card," he said, his tone suggesting impropriety. "Are you Jasmine Washington?" "Yes, I am. Washington Johnson, actually. I'm the principal architect at Urban Vision Design." She maintained eye contact, refusing to be intimidated. After several more minutes of unnecessary verification, Brad reluctantly tagged her luggage with first-class priority and directed her to security. The security line moved efficiently for most passengers, but when Jasmine reached the front, a TSA agent named Kyle pulled her aside. "Random screening," he announced loudly, gesturing her toward a separate area. Jasmine watched as several white passengers walked through without additional screening. "Is there a problem with my bag?" she asked. "Just procedure, ma'am," Kyle replied flatly. "Arms out to your sides, please." As a female TSA agent conducted an unnecessarily thorough pat-down, Jasmine noticed a family watching her with sympathetic expressions. The mother, a black woman approximately her age, shook her head slightly in silent acknowledgement of what was happening. After security finally cleared her, this same family approached as Jasmine reassembled her belongings. "They always seem to find us for those random screenings, don't they?" the woman said with a knowing smile. "I'm Diane Robinson. This is my husband Paul, and our twins, Amy and Aaron." "Jasmine Washington Johnson," she replied, grateful for the friendly faces. The 8-year-old twin stared at her with wide eyes until finally, Aaron blurted out, "You're the lady from the magazine. The one who designed the floating building in Seattle." Jasmine smiled, genuinely surprised. "The Cascade Center. You've seen it?" Amy nodded enthusiastically. "We have a subscription to Architecture Forward. We want to be architects too. They've been obsessed since they could hold crayons," Diane explained. "Are you headed to Chicago too?" "Yes, for a presentation." Jasmine checked her watch. "Should be boarding soon." As they walked together toward the gate, Diane shared her own travel experiences. "Paul and I fly to Chicago monthly for our business. Can't count how many times we've been downgraded, questioned, or randomly selected. It's exhausting," Jasmine agreed. "You'd think with a first-class ticket." "First class, coach, doesn't matter," Paul interjected. "Though first class does tend to bring out the worst in some staff. They just can't believe we belong there." At the gate, Jasmine's patience was tested again. Despite standing in the clearly marked first-class boarding lane, gate agent Megan attempted to redirect her. "This lane is for first-class passengers only," Megan said loudly. "I am a first-class passenger," Jasmine replied, presenting her boarding pass. Megan examined it with exaggerated scrutiny before reluctantly allowing her through, while waving forward a white businessman who hadn't even shown his boarding pass yet. Jasmine felt her phone vibrate and stepped aside to answer Terrence's call. "How's it going?" he asked. "The usual," she sighed. "Security randomly selected me, and the gate agent tried to keep me out of the first-class lane." She could hear Terrence's controlled anger through the phone. Document everything. Names, times, what happened. Already on it, she assured him. How's your mystery deal coming along? Just finalizing details now, he said, his tone softening. Should be wrapped up before you land. I can't wait to tell you about it. As first-class boarding was announced, Jasmine said goodbye and approached the gate. She could feel the flight attendant's disapproving gaze before she even handed over her boarding pass. Heather Burke, according to her name tag, scanned the pass with tight lips. Down the jet bridge, turn left at the aircraft door, Heather instructed, her tone notably cooler than it had been for previous passengers. Jasmine nodded and proceeded to board, already dreading the next 2 hours in what was supposed to be the most comfortable section of the plane. Jasmine settled into seat 2A, arranging her pregnancy support pillow and taking out the tablet containing her presentation materials. The first-class cabin filled gradually around her, predominantly with white businessmen in suits who barely glanced her way. The passenger assigned to 2B, a middle-aged white man in an expensive-looking suit, paused in the aisle upon seeing her. Frank Whitman, as she would later learn, frowned slightly before flagging down Heather. Is there another seat available? He asked, not bothering to lower his voice. Heather glanced at Jasmine, then back to Frank. Let me check, sir. Jasmine kept her eyes on her tablet, pretending not to notice. It wasn't worth the energy to confront every microaggression. Minutes later, Frank was escorted to a seat across the aisle, and a younger white businessman took 2B instead, offering Jasmine a polite nod as he sat down. As the boarding process completed, Heather and another flight attendant, Sarah, began their first-class service. Jasmine observed as Heather offered warm towels, took drink orders, and chatted amiably with every passenger in the cabin, except her. When Heather reached her row, she silently offered the towel and moved on without taking Jasmine's drink order. Excuse me, Jasmine called, keeping her voice pleasant. Could I get some water, please? I need to take prenatal vitamins. Heather turned back, her smile not reaching her eyes. We'll begin beverage service after takeoff. I understand, but I need to take medication now, with food, Jasmine explained, patting her pregnant belly gently. With visible reluctance, Heather retrieved a bottle of water, placing it on Jasmine's tray without a word before continuing her rounds. The businessman in 2B, who had introduced himself as Brian Taylor, raised an eyebrow. Is she always this charming, or are you special? Apparently I'm very special today, Jasmine replied dryly. As the flight reached cruising altitude, turbulence began to jostle the aircraft. Jasmine felt her baby kick vigorously in response to the motion, causing a wave of discomfort. She breathed deeply, placing both hands on her belly to calm both herself and her active little one. After about 30 minutes, Jasmine needed to use the restroom, an increasingly frequent necessity in her third trimester. She carefully made her way to the first-class lavatory, only to find Heather standing guard outside it. That's occupied, Heather stated. And when it's free, there's already someone waiting. Jasmine glanced around, seeing no other passengers waiting. I'll wait, then. The baby is pressing on my bladder. The main cabin lavatories might be available, Heather suggested pointedly. Those bathrooms are for paying first-class customers. The implication was unmistakable. Jasmine straightened her back, fixing Heather with a steady gaze. I am a paying first-class customer. Seat 2A. Heather's expression suggested disbelief. Were you upgraded at the gate? Stand by. No, I purchased this ticket 3 weeks ago, Jasmine replied, maintaining her composure despite mounting frustration. Brian, who had gotten up to stretch his legs, overheard the exchange. Is there a problem here? He asked, his presence seemingly causing Heather to reconsider her stance. No problem, Heather replied tersely. Just explaining the lavatory is occupied. At that moment, the lavatory door opened, and Jasmine stepped forward. Heather reluctantly moved aside, her body language radiating hostility. When Jasmine returned to her seat, she found her water bottle had been removed, her her tray table closed, and her pregnancy pillow shifted. She looked around for Heather to request another water, but the flight attendant studiously avoided eye contact while attending to other passengers. Sarah, the other flight attendant, passed by with the beverage cart shortly after. She smiled warmly at Jasmine. "What can I get for you?" "Water, please, and maybe some crackers if you have them. The turbulence is making me a bit nauseous." "Of course," Sarah replied, promptly providing the requested items. "Just press your call button if you need anything else." The contrast between the two flight attendants was striking. Jasmine took out her phone and made brief notes about the incident so far, including names and approximate times. Terrence had taught her the importance of documentation, especially in situations like this. As the flight progressed, the turbulence intensified. The captain announced they were passing through a weather system and instructed flight attendants to suspend service temporarily. Jasmine gripped her armrests, feeling her baby respond with agitated movements to each bump and drop. Just as the fasten seatbelt sign illuminated, the plane hit a particularly rough patch, causing Jasmine's water to spill across her tray table and onto her clothing. She reached for napkins to contain the spill, but Heather was already there, her expression thunderous. "Look at the mess you've made," she hissed, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. It was the turbulence, Jasmine explained, continuing to blot the water with available napkins. Heather began aggressively cleaning up, muttering just loud enough for Jasmine to hear, "Your kind always expects special treatment." The cabin grew uncomfortably quiet as several passengers turned to observe the interaction. Jasmine felt her heart rate increasing, knowing from experience that the situation was escalating beyond typical poor service into something more explicitly discriminatory. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," Jasmine stated calmly, meeting Heather's glare with steady composure. That request seemed to push Heather over some invisible line. She leaned closer, dropping her voice to a venomous whisper that contained a racial slur so vile that several passengers nearby gasped audibly. Instinctively, Jasmine reached for her phone and activated the recording function, placing it on her tray table. Whatever happened next, she would have evidence. The confrontation was building toward its inevitable climax, with every eye in first class now trained on the pregnant black woman and the increasingly hostile flight attendant looming over her. "What did you just say to me?" Jasmine asked, her voice steady despite the shock coursing through her body. The slur Heather had uttered hung in the air between them, almost visible in its toxicity. Passengers in nearby seats shifted uncomfortably. A few had their phones out, recording discreetly. The tension in the cabin was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Heather's face flushed, perhaps realizing she'd crossed a line that even she recognized as dangerous. But rather than backing down, she doubled down. "I said you people are always demanding special treatment," she repeated, omitting the slur this time but maintaining her aggressive stance. "That's not what you said," Brian interjected from his seat. "We all heard what you actually said." Heather shot him a venomous look. "This doesn't concern you, sir." The plane hit another patch of turbulence, causing the cabin to shake. Captain Jackson's voice came over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. We're experiencing some moderate turbulence that should last for the next 10 to 15 minutes. The timing couldn't have been worse." Jasmine felt a sharp contraction ripple across her abdomen, causing her to wince and clutch her belly protectively. The baby, agitated by her stress hormones and the plane's movement, kicked forcefully. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, approaching from the galley where she'd been securing loose items. Before Jasmine could answer, Heather interjected. "She's fine. Just putting on a show for attention." "I am not fine," Jasmine countered, breathing through the discomfort. "I'm experiencing contractions, likely from stress, and I'd like some assistance." Heather rolled her eyes dramatically. "Now you're playing the pregnancy card? How convenient." Several passengers made sounds of disapproval. A woman across the aisle spoke up, "She's clearly pregnant and in distress." "What is wrong with you?" Jasmine reached for the call button above her seat, needing to officially summon help. As her finger moved toward the button, Heather's hand shot out to block her. "Don't you dare," Heather hissed. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when reviewing the various passenger videos, it had to be slowed down to fully comprehend. As Jasmine persisted in reaching for the call button, Heather's right hand swung out and connected with Jasmine's left cheek in a resounding slap that echoed through the cabin. Time seemed to freeze. Jasmine's head snapped to the side from the impact. Her hand flew to her stinging cheek, eyes wide with shock. The entire first-class cabin erupted in gasps and exclamations. "Oh my God! Did she just? Someone get the captain." Everyone watching this now, what would you do if you witnessed this happening on your flight? Would you stand up for the victim or mind your own business? Comment 1 if you'd intervene immediately, 2 if you'd record as evidence, or 3 if you'd call for other flight staff. Like this video if you believe transportation discrimination needs more attention, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice prevailing against all odds. Just when you think this situation couldn't possibly escalate further, what could possibly happen next? Could this pregnant woman be in danger of going into early labor? How will the other passengers respond to this shocking assault? And what about her husband who just purchased the airline? Stay tuned as our story continues. The sound of Heather's palm striking Jasmine's cheek seemed to echo in the stunned silence that followed, a moment of collective shock before the cabin erupted in outrage. Multiple passengers immediately raised their phones, capturing the aftermath of the assault. Brian jumped to his feet despite the seatbelt sign, positioning himself protectively near Jasmine. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded of Heather, who stood frozen, her hands still raised, seemingly surprised by her own actions. Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes, not from the physical pain, though her cheek burned, but from the humiliation and shock. Her hands instinctively went to her belly, where she felt her baby's frantic movements. Sarah, the other flight attendant, rushed forward, horror evident on her face. "Heather! Back away right now." She turned to Jasmine, kneeling beside her seat. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. Are you alright? Do you need medical attention?" Before Jasmine could respond, a tall man from several rows back stood up. "I'm an air marshal," he announced, displaying his credentials. "My name is Gregory Evans. Everyone please remain calm and in your seats." He approached Heather with measured steps. "Ma'am, I need you to step back to the galley area immediately." She was being disruptive, Heather began, her voice shaking. Save it," Evans cut her off. "You've assaulted a passenger. That's a federal offense. Move to the galley now." As Evans escorted a now pale Heather toward the back, Captain Jackson's voice came over the intercom again. "Is there a medical professional on board? Please identify yourself to the cabin crew." A middle-aged black woman stood up from the second row. "I'm Dr. Patricia Thompson, an obstetrician," she announced, making her way to Jasmine's side. The synchronicity wasn't lost on Jasmine. Her own obstetrician shared the same name, though this was clearly a different woman. Still, it felt like a small mercy in the chaos. Dr. Thompson knelt beside Jasmine. "I'm going to check your pulse and ask you a few questions, if that's okay." At Jasmine's nod, she continued, "Are you experiencing any contractions? Any fluid leakage?" "Some contractions," Jasmine admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "They started during the turbulence and got worse during the confrontation." "As DR." Thompson assessed her condition. Jasmine felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands to see a text message from Terrence, "Just bought Skyway Airlines. Surprise for our anniversary. Deal closed 20 minutes ago. Call me when you land." A strangled laugh escaped her lips, drawing concerned looks from those around her. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "It's just, my husband. He just bought this airline 20 minutes ago." "Brian," who had been helping Dr. Thompson by fetching water and towels, stopped in his tracks. "Your husband bought Skyway? The entire airline?" "Apparently so," Jasmine replied, the absurdity of the situation washing over her in waves. "An anniversary present," he says. Sarah, who had overheard, turned visibly pale. "Your husband is the new owner of Skyway Airlines?" "Terrence Johnson," Jasmine confirmed, watching recognition dawn on several faces. Her husband was well known in business circles, his success story featured in numerous publications. As this revelation rippled through the cabin, Dr. Thompson continued her examination. "Your pulse is elevated, which is understandable given the circumstances. The baby's movements are strong, which is a good sign, but these contractions concern me. You'll need to be examined properly once we land." Brian had been quietly collecting contact information from passengers who had witnessed or recorded the incident. "We've got plenty of witnesses and footage," he assured Jasmine. "If you decide to press charges, which you absolutely should, you'll have support." From the cockpit, Captain Jackson emerged, surveying the scene with evident concern. "We're being granted priority landing at O'Hare," he announced. "We'll be on the ground in approximately 20 minutes. Medical personnel will meet us at the gate." He approached Jasmine, his expression grave. "Mrs. Washington Johnson, on behalf of Skyway Airlines, I want to express my deepest apologies for what happened. I've been informed of the situation, and I assure you, this is not representative of our values or training." Jasmine nodded acknowledgement, too emotionally drained to respond further. The irony that the airline was now technically her husband's property wasn't lost on her. In the galley, Air Marshal Evans was on the phone, presumably with ground authorities. Heather sat rigidly on the jump seat, her face ashen, staring straight ahead as if still processing what she had done. "The baby's movements have calmed somewhat," Dr. Thompson noted after a few more minutes of monitoring. "But I'd still recommend immediate medical attention upon landing. Stress can induce preterm labor, especially at 7 months." Jasmine nodded, taking deep, steadying breaths as she had learned in her prenatal classes. Her phone buzzed again with another text from Terrence. "Landing in Chicago myself in 45 minutes, board insisted I come immediately given the acquisition. Everything okay with your flight?" With trembling fingers, she replied, "No. Assaulted by flight attendant. Air Marshal involved. Getting priority landing. We'll need to see doctor for baby. Call when landed." Almost instantly, 3 dots appeared as Terrence typed his response. "What? On my way. Bringing legal team. Which flight attendant?" "Heather Burke," she typed back. "Don't worry, baby seems okay. They are on board helping." As the plane began its descent into Chicago, Jasmine gazed out the window at the city skyline emerging through the clouds. What should have been a routine business trip had turned into something she could never have anticipated. She placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling a gentle kick in response. "We're okay," she whispered to her unborn daughter. "Dad's coming, and apparently, he owns the airline now. No one's getting away with this." The plane touched down with a gentle bump, taxiing rapidly toward the gate. Through the window, Jasmine could see several emergency vehicles waiting on the tarmac, their lights flashing in the afternoon sun. The moment the aircraft reached the gate and the seatbelt sign switched off, a flurry of activity erupted. The cabin door opened to reveal a team of paramedics waiting in the jet bridge, accompanied by airport security and a harried-looking man in a Skyway Airlines executive uniform. "Mrs. Washington Johnson," one of the paramedics called, making his way directly to Jasmine's seat where Dr. Thompson was still monitoring her condition. "That's me," Jasmine confirmed, gathering her belongings with Brian's assistance. "We've been briefed on the situation. We'd like to get you to the medical facility for evaluation right away," the paramedic explained, helping her to her feet. The man in the executive uniform approached next, his face a mask of controlled panic. "Mrs. Washington Johnson, I'm Raymond Phillips, Regional Manager for Skyway Airlines at O'Hare. On behalf of the company, I want to express our deepest apologies for this inexcusable incident. He glanced around the cabin, noting the numerous passengers still recording with their phones. We'd like to offer complimentary vouchers to everyone on this flight for the inconvenience and distress. Vouchers? Jasmine interrupted, her patience finally reaching its limit. She held up her phone displaying Terrence's text. My husband just bought this airline. I don't need your vouchers, Mr. Phillips. What I need is for you to explain how one of your flight attendants felt empowered to racially abuse and physically assault a pregnant passenger. Phillips's face drained of color as he processed her words. Your husband bought Skyway. Terrence Johnson. The acquisition was finalized during this flight, Jasmine confirmed, a grim satisfaction washing over her as she watched the implications dawn on his face. Behind Phillips, Air Marshal Evans escorted a subdued Heather Burke through the cabin toward the exit, where Chicago police officers waited. Heather kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, refusing to look at Jasmine or the other passengers, many of whom were openly glaring at her. I'd like your contact information, Mr. Phillips, Jasmine continued. My husband's legal team will be in touch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to see a doctor. As Jasmine made her way toward the exit, supported by the paramedic and Dr. Thompson, passengers called out words of support. We've got your back. We've sent you the videos. Take care of yourself and the baby. In the terminal, a small crowd had gathered. News of the incident had spread rapidly through social media, with several passengers having sent their videos to friends, family, and even news outlets during the flight's final approach. A few reporters were already positioned near the gate, cameras at the ready. Mrs. Johnson. Can you comment on the assault? Is it true your husband just acquired Skyway Airlines? Will you be pressing charges against the flight attendant? Jasmine kept her head down, allowing the paramedics and airport security to shield her from the press as they escorted her to a private elevator reserved for airport personnel. Phillips followed anxiously, his phone pressed to his ear as he presumably informed corporate headquarters about the unfolding PR catastrophe. The airport medical center is fully equipped for obstetric emergencies, one paramedic assured her as they descended to a lower level. And Chicago Memorial has been alerted in case you need to be transferred there. Thank you, Jasmine replied, wincing as another mild contraction rippled across her abdomen. Has anyone contacted my husband? He's been informed of your arrival and current location, Phillips interjected, still hovering nearby. He's landing at the private aviation terminal in approximately 20 minutes. We'll have transportation waiting to bring him directly to you. In the medical center, a team was prepared for Jasmine's arrival. She was quickly settled into a private room where an obstetrician began a thorough examination, including fetal monitoring. The baby's heartbeat is strong and regular, the doctor noted after a few minutes. That's very good news. You're experiencing some mild contractions, but they don't appear to be progressive or indicative of preterm labor at this point. Relief washed over Jasmine. So the baby is okay? All indications are positive, the doctor confirmed. However, given the circumstances and the stress you've experienced, we'd like to continue monitoring for at least a few hours to ensure the contractions subside completely. While the medical team worked, Jasmine's phone began ringing incessantly. She glanced at the screen to see Terrence's name and answered immediately. Terrence, she breathed, her composure finally cracking now that she heard his voice. I'm 5 minutes out, he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. Are you all right? The baby? We're both okay, she assured him. They're monitoring us now, but the doctor says everything looks good. Where are you? Just landing. I brought Dr. Morris with me, and our legal team is en route from Atlanta. Terrence had clearly mobilized his considerable resources the moment he received her text. Phillips called me. I told him to expect an entirely new executive team by morning. You actually bought the airline, Jasmine said, still processing the coincidental timing. Right before all this happened. Worst timing possible, Terence replied grimly. Or maybe the best. No one's getting away with this, Jazz. No one. After disconnecting, Jasmine lay back against the pillows, allowing the medical team to continue their work. Outside her room, she could hear increasing commotion as more Skyway executives arrived, along with airport authorities and, presumably, representatives from various regulatory agencies. Meanwhile, across the airport, video clips of the incident were spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. #SkyWaySlap and #FlyingWhileblack were trending nationally within an hour of landing. News networks had picked up the story, with aviation experts and civil rights commentators already providing analysis. Skyway's stock had begun a precipitous decline as investors reacted to both the viral incident and the unexpected acquisition announcement. Trading would eventually be halted after a 15% drop, an extraordinary market reaction that reflected the severity of the situation. In a holding room near the airport police station, Heather Burke sat alone, still in her Skyway uniform. She had been informed of her rights and the potential charges against her, assault, battery, and potentially hate crime enhancements given the racial component of the incident. What she hadn't yet been told was that her victim was now, technically, her boss's wife. 20 minutes later, the door to Jasmine's medical room opened to reveal Terence Johnson, his normally composed demeanor replaced by naked concern as he rushed to her side. "Jazz," he breathed, gathering her hands in his. "Thank God you're all right." Behind him stood Dr. Morris, Jasmine's regular obstetrician, who had apparently been with Terence when the news broke. She immediately conferred with the airport medical team, reviewing the monitoring data and examination results. "The baby's vitals are excellent," Dr. Morris confirmed after her review. "The contractions appear to be stress-induced Braxton Hicks, not preterm labor. They're already decreasing in frequency and intensity." Terence visibly relaxed at this news, though the anger hadn't left his eyes. "I've already spoken with our attorneys. They're drafting criminal charges against the flight attendant and civil action against Skyway, or rather, what's left of the previous ownership structure." "It's ironic," Jasmine said softly. "You bought this airline to fix its problems, and on the very same day." "I had no idea how deep those problems ran," Terence admitted. The board disclosed the discrimination lawsuits during due diligence, but they characterized them as isolated incidents. Clearly, there's a systemic issue that needs addressing. A gentle knock at the door interrupted their conversation. It was the Robinson family from the airport, looking concerned. "We heard what happened on your flight," Diane explained. "The twins were worried about you and the baby." Amy and Aaron peeked around their mother, clutching handmade cards they'd apparently created during their own flight. "We made these for you," Aaron said shyly, holding out his card. "Mom said making art helps when you're sad or scared." Jasmine accepted the cards with genuine gratitude, touched by the children's thoughtfulness. "Thank you. That's exactly what I needed." As the Robinsons visited briefly, Terence stepped outside to take a call from his legal team. The wheels of justice and corporate restructuring were already in motion, with consequences that would extend far beyond one flight attendant's moment of hatred. Chicago Memorial Hospital's VIP wing was quieter than the main facility, with tasteful artwork adorning walls painted in soothing colors. After 4 hours of monitoring at the airport medical center, doctors had recommended Jasmine be transferred for overnight observation, primarily as a precaution. She had just settled into her private room when Terence returned from a series of urgent calls, his face showing both exhaustion and determination. He pulled a chair to her bedside, taking her hand in his. "How are you feeling?" he asked, studying her face intently. "Better," Jasmine assured him. "The contractions have stopped completely. Mostly I'm just tired." She gestured to the fetal monitor still strapped to her belly. "Little Miss seems to have calmed down too." Terence placed his free hand gently on her stomach, smiling when he felt a soft kick in response. "She's a fighter, like her mom." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the steady beeping of the fetal monitor. Finally, Jasmine asked the question that had been on her mind for hours. "So when exactly were you planning to tell me you bought an airline?" Terence laughed softly. "It was supposed to be a surprise for our anniversary next week. I know how much you've complained about Skyway's service and their discrimination issues." His expression sobered. "I had no idea how bad it really was." "Tell me about the acquisition," Jasmine prompted, genuinely curious about the business side of things. Terence leaned back in his chair. "Skyway has been struggling financially for years. Their customer service reputation is abysmal, and they've been hit with several discrimination lawsuits that they've settled quietly. When I heard they were looking for buyers, I saw an opportunity." "To make money?" Jasmine asked, though she already knew the answer. "To create change," Terence corrected. "The airline industry has a terrible track record with diversity and inclusion. I thought, what if a major airline was owned by a black man? What kind of culture shift could that create?" Jasmine squeezed his hand. "And then your pregnant black wife gets assaulted on your airline the very day you acquire it." "The timing is almost unbelievable," Terence agreed. "The deal closed at 11:42 a.m. According to the timestamps on the videos, Heather Burke slapped you at 12:07 p.m. I officially owned the airline for exactly 25 minutes before the incident." "What happens now?" Jasmine asked. "Well, the immediate consequences are already in motion. Burke has been arrested on assault charges. The Chicago police are investigating whether to add hate crime enhancements based on the racial slur witnesses heard." He ran a hand over his closely cropped hair, a gesture Jasmine recognized as his way of organizing thoughts during complex situations. From a business perspective, Skyway's stock plummeted today. Trading was halted after a 15% drop. The board is in emergency session right now. Several executives have already offered their resignations. "And you're accepting them?" Jasmine guessed. "All of them," Terence confirmed. "This incident didn't happen in a vacuum. It reflects a culture that tolerates, maybe even encourages, this kind of behavior." A soft knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Dr. Morris entered with a tablet in hand, reviewing the latest monitoring data. "Everything looks excellent," she announced. "Both mother and baby are stable, with all vitals in normal ranges. The contractions have stopped completely, and there are no signs of distress. So we can go home tomorrow?" Jasmine asked hopefully. "Barring any changes overnight, yes," Dr. Morris confirmed. "Though I'd recommend taking it easy for the next few days. No work, no stress, plenty of rest." "My presentation," Jasmine suddenly remembered. "I was supposed to pitch to Westridge Development tomorrow morning." "Already handled," Terence assured her. "I spoke with Marion West personally. When I explained the situation, she was horrified. They've rescheduled for next month, and she mentioned they're strongly leaning toward urban vision for the project regardless." Jasmine relaxed back against her pillows. "Thank you." After Dr. Morris left, promising to check in again before end of shift, there was another knock at the door. This time it was the Robinson family, arms full of flowers and a small gift bag. "We hope it's okay we came by," Diane said, her husband and children hovering behind her. The twins insisted. "Of course it's okay," Jasmine said warmly. "Please, come in." Amy and Aaron approached the bed cautiously, clearly intimidated by the hospital setting and Terence's presence. "We brought you these," Amy said, presenting a bouquet of cheerful yellow daisies. "And we made something else for the baby." Aaron handed over the gift bag. Inside, Jasmine found a small, handcrafted mobile featuring paper airplanes in various colors. "It's airplanes," Aaron explained unnecessarily. "But better ones than that mean lady's airline." The adults laughed, the children's innocence providing a much-needed moment of levity. "These are beautiful," Jasmine told them sincerely. "They'll be perfect in the nursery." While the children chatted excitedly about their own flight experience, Diane pulled Terence aside for a quieter conversation. "We've been following the news," she said. "The videos from the flight are everywhere. People are outraged, as they should be." Terence nodded grimly. "It's going to be a media firestorm for a while." "For what it's worth," Paul added, joining them, "this could be a powerful catalyst for change. Not just for one airline, but for the industry." "That's the plan," Terence assured them. "This isn't just about one racist flight attendant. It's about dismantling systems that allow people like her to feel empowered to act that way." Outside the hospital, media vans had begun gathering as news of Jasmine's location spread. Security had been increased around the VIP wing, with strict instructions about who was permitted entry. In a conference room several floors below, Terence's legal team had set up a temporary command center, coordinating with corporate attorneys, civil rights lawyers, and PR specialists. The incident had evolved from a personal affront to a national conversation about race, corporate responsibility, and the persistent reality of discrimination in everyday American life. Later that evening, after the Robinsons had departed and Jasmine was resting, Terence stood by the window overlooking the Chicago skyline. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from Brian Taylor, the businessman who had sat next to Jasmine on the flight. "Mr. Johnson," Brian greeted him. "I wanted to check on your wife's condition." "She's stable, thank you," Terence replied. "And thank you for standing up for her during the incident. Not everyone would have done that." "It was horrifying to witness," Brian admitted. "Listen, the reason I'm calling, beyond checking on Mrs. Washington Johnson, is that I've been collecting statements and contact information from other passengers. Several of us are willing to testify if needed." "I appreciate that," Terence said sincerely. "My legal team will be in touch." After ending the call, Terence returned to Jasmine's bedside. She had fallen asleep, one hand resting protectively over her belly. He gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, his heart constricting at the thought of what she'd endured. Terence Johnson had built his fortune by identifying problems and creating innovative solutions. Now, fate had handed him perhaps his biggest challenge yet. Transforming a company with a culture so toxic that it had physically harmed the person he loved most in the world. As he settled into the chair beside her bed, prepared to stay through the night, Terence began mentally outlining the sweeping changes that would begin at Skyway Airlines first thing tomorrow morning. 1 week later, Jasmine Washington Johnson sat beside her husband in a sleek conference room at Skyway Airlines headquarters in Atlanta. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, planes bearing the company's distinctive blue and silver livery taxied across the tarmac, continuing their scheduled routes despite the corporate earthquake taking place inside the building. Around the massive oval table sat 12 board members, most looking distinctly uncomfortable. At precisely 9 a.m., Terence rose to address the room. "Good morning," he began, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had helped build his tech empire. "I've spent the past week reviewing every aspect of this airline's operations, culture, and history. What I've found is, frankly, disturbing." He nodded to his assistant, who distributed thick folders to each person present. "These packets contain detailed findings from our preliminary audit. I'll summarize the key points. Skyway Airlines has systematically failed to address discrimination at every level of its operation." Terence clicked a remote, bringing up the first slide on the wall-mounted screen. It showed a breakdown of employee demographics compared to industry standards. "Your workforce diversity is significantly below industry averages, particularly in leadership positions. Of 217 executives and senior managers, only 9 are Black, 3 are Hispanic, and 11 are Asian. That's barely 10% non-white leadership in a company operating in cities with much higher diversity percentages." He clicked to the next slide, which displayed a graph of discrimination complaints filed by both passengers and employees. In the past 5 years, Skyway has received 723 formal complaints alleging racial discrimination. Of those, 681 were settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements, 41 were dismissed outright, and only 1 resulted in disciplinary action. The board members shifted uncomfortably as Terrence continued methodically through the data, laying bare the airline's failings. Jasmine watched her husband work, impressed as always by his thoroughness and strategic thinking. The incident with Heather Burke had been personal and painful, but Terrence had channeled that pain into purpose. Now, Terrence said, closing the statistical portion of his presentation, I'd like to introduce my wife, Jasmine Washington Johnson, who will share her first-hand experience as a Skyway passenger last week. Jasmine stood, resting one hand on her now 8 months pregnant belly. She had carefully considered whether to speak today, ultimately deciding that her voice needed to be heard by those in power. What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident, she began, making eye contact with each board member. It was the predictable outcome of a corporate culture that tolerates discrimination. Before Heather Burke slapped me, she subjected me to escalating harassment from the moment I boarded. And she clearly expected no consequences for her actions. She detailed the events of the flight chronologically, from the first dismissive interaction to the shocking moment of physical assault. Several board members visibly winced at the descriptions. The most telling part, Jasmine concluded, is that she felt comfortable enough to behave this way openly, in front of dozens of witnesses. That speaks volumes about the environment Skyway has created. As Jasmine returned to her seat, Terrence stood again. Thank you, Jasmine. Now, let's discuss the path forward. The next slide displayed a comprehensive transformation plan. Effective immediately, Skyway Airlines will undergo complete leadership restructuring. I've accepted the resignations of the CEO, COO, and 7 vice presidents. Interim leadership will be announced this afternoon. He clicked to the next slide. We're implementing a zero-tolerance discrimination policy with clear reporting mechanisms and transparency requirements. Every complaint will be thoroughly investigated, with results reported to me personally. The plan continued with specific initiatives, comprehensive bias training for all employees, recruitment reforms to increase diversity at all levels, revision of customer service protocols, and independent auditing of the company's progress toward inclusion goals. Additionally, Terrence announced, Skyway will establish a $20 million scholarship program for minorities pursuing careers in aviation, from pilots to mechanics to management. One of the board members, an older white man named Harold Drummond who had been with the company for decades, cleared his throat. Mr. Johnson, while these initiatives sound admirable, they represent a significant financial investment during an already precarious time for the airline. Our shareholders watched our stock drop 15% in a single day because one employee felt empowered to assault a pregnant woman based on her race, Terrence interrupted calmly. I believe they'll understand the business case for ensuring that never happens again. Another board member, Catherine Yates, spoke up more supportively. These changes are long overdue. I've been raising concerns about our company culture for years without meaningful response. Mr. Johnson, you have my full support. Terrence nodded acknowledgement before continuing. Beyond policy changes, we're also addressing the physical environment. He gestured to Jasmine. My wife is a renowned architect specializing in spaces that promote inclusion and positive interaction. She'll be redesigning our crew training facilities to reinforce our new cultural values. Jasmine hadn't been expecting this announcement but smiled at the thoughtful connection between her professional expertise and the company's needs. The presentation continued with Brandon Mitchell, the newly appointed head of public relations, outlining the brand rehabilitation strategy. The Skyway name and logo would remain for now, but with a refreshed visual identity emphasizing connection and respect. A major advertising campaign would launch in 3 months, once the internal changes had taken root. Finally, Terrence said, nearing the end of the presentation, let's address the specific incident that brought us here. Heather Burke has been terminated and faces criminal charges for assault. But we're also investigating everyone in her reporting chain to determine how her behavior was allowed to continue unchecked. He clicked to a slide showing employee feedback about Burke. Numerous complaints from colleagues and passengers that had apparently been ignored or dismissed. This wasn't one bad employee, Terrence emphasized. This was a systemic failure to enforce basic standards of human decency. As the meeting concluded, Terrence opened the floor for questions. The discussion that followed was sometimes tense but ultimately productive, with most board members recognizing both the moral and business imperatives for change. Afterward, as they made their way to Terrence's temporary office, Jasmine squeezed her husband's hand. "That went better than expected." "The board knows they don't have much choice," Terrence replied. "Between the public relations disaster and the legal exposure, maintaining the status quo isn't an option." In the office, they found Brian Taylor waiting. After his supportive actions during the flight, Terrence had offered him a position leading the new customer experience department. Brian had accepted immediately, taking a leave of absence from his previous company to help transform Skyway. "The employee survey results just came in," Brian reported. "It's a mixed bag. Many staff members are relieved about the changes and have stories of their own about discrimination they've faced or witnessed. Others are resistant, calling it an overreaction to one incident." "That's to be expected," Terrence acknowledged. "Real change is never universal or immediate. We're in this for the long haul." As they discussed implementation details for the new initiatives, Jasmine observed the activity in the office beyond. Staff members moved with new purpose, some looking uncertain but many energized by the possibility of meaningful transformation. The corporate earthquake was underway, shaking loose old patterns and creating space for something better to emerge. Later that afternoon, at a press conference held in the Skyway headquarters lobby, Terrence formally announced the changes coming to the airline. With Jasmine at his side, he addressed the assembled journalists with characteristic directness. "What happened on Flight 1457 last week was unacceptable but not unpredictable, given the culture that had been allowed to develop at this company. Today marks the beginning of fundamental change at Skyway Airlines. We're committed to creating an airline where every passenger and employee is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of race, gender, or background." As cameras flashed and reporters called out questions, Jasmine reflected on the strange, painful journey that had brought them here. One hateful act had created an opportunity for systemic change that could potentially improve thousands of lives. It wasn't how she would have chosen to make a difference, but she was determined to ensure something positive emerged from her experience. The press conference concluded with Terrence's pledge, "Judge us not by our words today, but by our actions in the coming months and years." The transformation of Skyway Airlines begins now. 6 months later, the corporate headquarters of what was formerly Skyway Airlines hummed with activity. Sunlight streamed through the redesigned atrium where the company's new name and logo, Horizon Airlines, were prominently displayed. The symbolic shift from sky to horizon represented the expanded vision, not just transportation through the air, but movement toward a better future. In a comfortable office overlooking the tarmac, Jasmine Washington Johnson cradled her 3-month-old daughter, Amara, while reviewing architectural plans spread across her desk. The baby gurgled contentedly, her tiny fingers grasping at a soft toy designed to look like an airplane. A gentle knock at the door preceded Terrence's entrance, his face lighting up at the sight of his wife and daughter. "The final walkthrough of the training center is scheduled for tomorrow," Jasmine informed him, gesturing to the blueprints. "I think you'll be pleased with how the space embodies the new corporate values." "I've seen enough to know it's brilliant," Terrence replied, bending to kiss Amara's forehead before kissing Jasmine as well. "Just like her mother." Jasmine had taken on the redesign of the crew training facilities as a special project, creating spaces that subtly reinforced concepts of inclusion, respect, and collaboration. The project had been therapeutic in many ways, allowing her to channel the trauma of her experience into positive creation. "Are the Robinsons here yet?" she asked, gathering Amara's things. "Just arrived. They're waiting in the main lobby with Brian." Today marked the grand reopening ceremony for Horizon Airlines, timed to coincide with the completion of the company's initial transformation phase. The changes had been swift and sweeping: new leadership throughout the organization, comprehensive retraining for all staff, revised policies and procedures, and the physical redesign of key spaces. In the expansive lobby, a small crowd had gathered for the ceremony. Industry representatives, media, employees, and special guests mingled beneath banners proclaiming the company's new mission, connecting people with dignity and respect. Amy and Aaron Robinson, now 9 years old, bounced with excitement when they spotted Jasmine and baby Amara. In the months since the incident, the Robinson family had become friends, with the twins' interest in architecture blossoming under Jasmine's mentorship. "Is it time yet?" Aaron asked eagerly, eyeing the large ribbon stretched across the entrance to the newly designed terminal connector. "Almost," Jasmine assured him. "You two remember what to do." Both children nodded solemnly, clearly taking their ribbon-cutting responsibilities very seriously. Brian Taylor approached, clipboard in hand. "Everything's set. The before and after presentation is ready, and we've got representatives from all employee groups present." In the 6 months since joining Horizon, Brian had transformed the customer experience department, implementing protocols that earned the airline its highest satisfaction ratings in over a decade. His first-hand witness of discrimination had fueled his commitment to ensuring it never happened again on his watch. As the ceremony began, Terrence took the podium to address the assembled crowd. "6 months ago, we promised to fundamentally change this airline's culture. Today, I'm proud to share our progress," he began, before outlining the concrete steps taken: a 60% increase in leadership diversity, a new reporting system that had already addressed over 300 previously ignored complaints, comprehensive bias training completed by 100% of employees, and customer satisfaction scores that had risen from among the industry's lowest to the top quartile. "But numbers only tell part of the story," Terrence continued. "The real transformation is happening in daily interactions and decisions throughout the organization." He invited several employees to share their experiences of the changing culture. A black pilot described how the revised promotion system had finally recognized his qualifications after years of being passed over. A Hispanic flight attendant spoke about feeling empowered to report inappropriate passenger behavior without fear of dismissal. A white ground crew supervisor acknowledged his own unconscious biases and how the training had helped him become a more effective leader. Following these testimonials, Jasmine took the podium, Amara sleeping peacefully in her arms. "When I boarded that flight 6 months ago, I never imagined it would lead to this moment," she said. "What happened to me was painful and frightening, but the response from witnesses who stood up for me, from medical professionals who cared for me, and ultimately from this company under new leadership, has restored my faith in our collective capacity for change." She nodded to the Robinson twins, who moved to the ribbon with comically large ceremonial scissors. "It seems fitting that these children, who showed such compassion during a difficult time, should help us mark this new beginning." With guidance from their parents, Amy and Aaron cut the ribbon to enthusiastic applause, officially opening the connector to the terminal where Horizon's newly trained crew members would welcome passengers. As the formal ceremony concluded and guests moved through the connector to tour the renovated terminal, an unexpected figure appeared at the edge of the lobby. Heather Burke, no longer in a flight attendant uniform, stood hesitantly near the exit. Jasmine spotted her first, surprise momentarily rendering her speechless. Terrence followed her gaze, his expression hardening. "What is she doing here?" he murmured. "I invited her," came a voice from behind them. They turned to find Judge Patricia Coleman, who had presided over Heather's case. The judge had been invited to the ceremony as a respected community leader. "Ms. Burke's community service at the East Side Youth Center has been exemplary," Judge Coleman explained. "When she expressed a desire to apologize in person, I suggested today might be appropriate. But the choice to speak with her is entirely yours." Terrence looked to Jasmine, clearly ready to support whatever decision she made. After a moment's consideration, Jasmine handed Amara to him. "I'll speak with her," she decided. Briefly. With cautious steps, Jasmine approached the woman who had assaulted her 6 months earlier. Heather Burke looked markedly different. Humbled, her formerly rigid posture now uncertain, her expression apprehensive rather than disdainful. "Mrs. Washington Johnson," Heather began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't expect forgiveness, and I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to say, face to face, how deeply sorry I am for what I did to you." Jasmine remained silent, studying the woman before her. "Working at the youth center has changed me," Heather continued. "The children there. They've taught me more than I could ever teach them. About prejudice, about pain, about resilience." She pulled a small envelope from her purse. "I wrote this for your daughter. For when she's older. An apology for how I treated her mother, and a promise to spend the rest of my life working to be better, to help create a world where what happened to you doesn't happen to her." Jasmine accepted the envelope, her emotions complex and contradictory. "I can't say I forgive you yet, Heather. That journey is still ongoing for me. But I acknowledge your apology and your efforts to change." Heather nodded, clearly not expecting even this much. "Thank you for hearing me out. That's more than I deserve." As Heather turned to leave, Jasmine called after her, "The hardest part of growth is facing the truth about ourselves. It seems you're doing that work." The encounter left Jasmine pensive as she rejoined her family for the remainder of the celebration. The path to healing, personal and institutional, was rarely straightforward, often involving uncomfortable confrontations with past wrongs. Later that evening, at a smaller reception for key stakeholders, Terrence made one final announcement: Horizon Airlines would implement an industry-leading parental leave policy, offering 6 months of fully paid leave to all new parents regardless of gender or how they became parents. "This policy was inspired by my own experience these past months," he explained. "The precious time with our daughter has been invaluable, and every parent deserves that opportunity without financial stress." The announcement was met with enthusiastic approval, particularly from employees who had previously had to make impossible choices between bonding with their children and maintaining financial stability. 5 years later, Jasmine stood at the podium of the American Institute of Architects' annual award ceremony, accepting recognition for her design of Horizon Airlines International Terminal, a structure widely praised for its innovative approach to creating welcoming, inclusive public spaces. In the audience sat Terrence and 5-year-old Amara, the latter practically bouncing in her seat with excitement at seeing her mother recognized. Beside them were the Robinson twins, now teenagers pursuing their own paths toward careers in design. "Architecture at its best doesn't just create buildings, it creates experiences," Jasmine said in her acceptance speech. The Horizon International Terminal was designed to embody the principle that every traveler deserves dignity, comfort, and respect. She glanced at her family, smiling. "My daughter has never known air travel to be anything but positive. Her experiences are vastly different from what I endured that day 5 years ago. And that's the point of transformation, to create something better for those who come after us." After the ceremony, the family boarded a Horizon flight back to Atlanta. The diverse crew welcomed them aboard with genuine warmth, the captain personally greeting Amara, who announced her intention to become a pilot, just like Captain Maya. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Jasmine gazed out the window at the sunset painting the clouds in brilliant hues. She reflected on the strange, painful journey that had led to this moment, how one act of hatred had catalyzed sweeping change, how trauma had been transformed into purpose. Terrence, noticing her contemplative expression, took her hand. "Penny for your thoughts." Jasmine smiled, squeezing his hand. "I was just thinking about turbulence." "Turbulence?" he echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Sometimes," she explained, watching Amara happily drawing in her seat beside them, "the worst turbulence leads to the smoothest flights." This powerful story reminds us that discrimination doesn't occur in isolation, it thrives in environments that tolerate and enable it. What happened to Jasmine wasn't just about one flight attendant's prejudice, but about a corporate culture that allowed such behavior to exist unchecked. The lesson here is threefold. First, systemic change requires acknowledging the problem at its root rather than treating isolated symptoms. Second, true transformation demands accountability at all levels, from individual actions to corporate policies. Third, healing and progress often come hand in hand with difficult confrontations and uncomfortable truths. The story also highlights the importance of bystander intervention. Without passengers like Brian documenting the incident and speaking up, justice might have been more difficult to achieve. In our society, witnesses to discrimination have a crucial role to play in breaking cycles of injustice. Finally, we learn that even painful experiences can become catalysts for positive change when channeled through purposeful action, as Jasmine demonstrated by transforming her trauma into architectural designs that promote inclusion. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wondered what you should do? Share your thoughts in the comments about how you would respond as a bystander in a situation like Jasmine's. If this story of overcoming racism moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful racism stories that inspire change. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might be struggling to stand up against discrimination in their workplace or daily life. Your share could be the encouragement they need to speak up. Thank you for watching this journey of resilience and transformation. Remember that each of us has the power to create ripples of change that can eventually transform entire systems. Stay strong, speak up, and keep believing in a more inclusive future for all.